For what has already been a very wild couple of weeks in the NHL, it's gotten even spicier, people. There are injuries across the NHL, and that means fantasy implications and time to get real serious. Let's get right to it.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to your show. It is the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Steele and Flip. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. And like I said off the top, folks, this NHL season has had a lot already to unpack. And right after we're just starting to settle things down, we have 4 major injuries across the NHL, Steele. We have surgeries. We have block shot results. We have lingering issues, all for pretty key fantasy players as well. So it's time to listen up, tap in, and tune in because we have to take a look around the league, Steele, where we can maybe fill some holes. We're going to break down what these injuries mean to Aaron Ekblad, Gabriel Landeskog, Connor Brown, Tyler Bertuzzi, and of course, you know we're going to pay these bills by paying some bets in. Steele and I have been on a rough ride, but we are going to be back in a big way for big-time bets at the end of the show. But yeah, Steele, for some reason, on our laps falls 4 big pieces of injury news. So this is a bit of an injury fallout extravaganza here.
Yes.
But we can probably start with Gabriel Landeskog, which I think you and I can both agree might be the most concerning injury in terms of can a player come back from what they're dealing with currently, because this guy has now had 2 major knee surgeries in less than 8 months, and that is not good when you're a guy who plays with the edge that Landeskog does.
Yeah, it's a big concern for Gabriel Landeskog's career. It's a big concern for the Colorado Avalanche. A big concern, obviously, for anyone that drafted him in their fantasy leagues. And you know, obviously, you're going to put him on the IR immediately. This is not a guy that you want to drop. He's going to be on the IR. He's going to be staying there for at least 3 months minimum. Yep. But it's some huge concern for the Colorado Avalanche. And of course, they still have a fantastic team, but he's a big part of their organization. He's a big part of the reason why they won the Stanley Cup last year. And they're without their captain for the next 3 months, minimum guaranteed. So definitely a tough surgery to go through. Again, like you said, twice now in the last 8 months. But this is where you have to start looking at some players that are on the waiver wire, guys like we talked about in yesterday's episode, who are under 50% owned and still have errors in it and are still bringing that value. And there's a lot of guys, and I've looked down the rabbit hole on some of the guys on third lines, and that's who I'm going to highlight some of these guys right here. I want to get your input and your thoughts on some of these guys I'm listing off. I want to start with actually Gabriel Vilardi of the LA Kings, third line, playing with Quinton Byfield and Carl Gunstrom. He's had a very hot start to the season so far. 4 goals, 3 assists. He's playing on that third line, like I said, but he's actually also on the first power play unit with Adrian Kempe, Anze Kopitar, Drew Doughty. So somehow this third liner is getting that top power play minutes. He's, like I said, 4 goals, 7 points so far to start the season. The LA Kings are on a 3-game win streak. So that's someone I would look at as well. Also going over to the Eastern Conference, what about AJ Greer? This guy just came out of nowhere for me. He's off to a pretty hot start as well. 3 goals, 5 points, playing on the third line with the Boston Bruins. He's only owned at 2.5%, so he's going to be available in pretty much every single fantasy league you're in. And he's put up 9 shots, 14 hits. What about another guy in Sean Monahan, who we talked a little bit about in the offseason, getting out of Calgary, getting a new fresh start with the Montreal Canadiens. He's got a goal and 1 assist as well. Those are some of the guys that I'm looking forward-wise to replace Gabriel Landeskog. But again, with this injury and him being on the IR, when you're picking new guys up, it's going to be one of those things where you're rotating a bunch of players in and out every single week. Because again, with these waiver wire guys, they're very streaky.
And here's the thing, Steele. Some of those guys you mentioned, if you're having to go from Landeskog down to these options, it is not going to be pretty. And, you highlighted a couple of guys who are streaky right now that you can probably lay your hands on. You might be able to get even some more quality players if you do your research, but maybe it's worthwhile to take a flyer on one of these hot guys who are only owned at 2 or 3%. Greer has come out of nowhere, no track record, but he's hot. Is that worth it? You mentioned Gabe Vilardi, and very quickly with him, I believe he's a good Windsor Spitfire boy. He was, I think, a 10th overall draft pick. He's definitely a top 15 first rounder. And what I really did like about what was going on with that third line was Alex Iafallo was also on that left wing instead of Grundstrom. And that trio between Byfield and the two guys I just mentioned, I'm drawing heavy blanks now all of a sudden. Sorry, Byfield, Vilardi, and Iafallo were looking nasty together, Steele. Yeah. So I love the Gabe Vilardi pick out of all three of the players you mentioned. But the point I want to make, and we'll leave it with Landeskog, is this. 2 major knee surgeries 8 months apart. And what it means for the Colorado Avalanche might mean just as much for this guy's career, because now all of a sudden, Steele, 59 points in 51 regular season games last year, aside from character, which now you lose Nas and your captain, 2 of the main glue character guys on this team, and you're losing 59 points in 51 games. Now all of a sudden, those ruthless teeth to this Colorado attack don't seem as sharp. Still good, but what does this mean long term? I'm telling you, some of those teams in the Western Conference are going to take note at this, because a little chink in the armor here is what I'm seeing from the Colorado Avalanche. But I like your takes. You're going to have to look around and get into the bottom of the barrel here. There's going to be some of these situations as well for Aaron Ekblad, for Connor Brown, and for Tyler Bertuzzi in the next couple of weeks, because maybe aside for Connor Brown, and maybe this year because he plays with Ovi, he's a little bit more important. Those other guys are major pieces, Steele. I know you personally have Aaron Ekblad, so are you looking around to do some things with this Aaron Ekblad news as well, which you're okay with? I say we talk about him next.
Yeah, I already am. He's already been moved over to my IR, and like you said, this affects my fantasy team very, very much so, because he was the first defenseman I drafted for my fantasy league. He's out for a minimum of 11 games with a groin injury. And, for me, this is just really sad to see for his career. It's sad to see for fantasy owners and for anyone that drafted him. It just seems like no matter what, these injuries just seem to keep on following him like a puppy dog every single year. And he just can't seem to get away from it. But what we saw from him last year, 57 points in 61 games, that's what we should be getting out of Aaron Ekblad year in and year out. But again, those injuries just keep on lingering. It just keeps on affecting him every single year. And that's the risk of drafting him. And that, I took that risk drafting him early in our fantasy league, and it's coming to bite me in the butt right now, real early in the season. But there are a couple of guys that I've looked at. I've taken a look. I've, in our league, we have the budget of $500 to, purchase players there.
Yes.
And I've looked at a couple of different defensemen that can fill that spot for Aaron Ekblad. Again, rotating these guys out every single week, because they're not top tier defensemen. You don't really know what you're going to be getting out of them point production wise. But, in the other categories, you're getting a decent amount. So again, I'm looking over towards the LA Kings. Matt Roy, we talked about Sean Durzi. Sean Durzi and Matt Roy play together on the second line. Matt Roy has 4 points, 12 shots, 8 hits, 14 blocks. He's getting a ton of looks on the point. He's getting a ton of looks in all of those categories, and he's producing as well. What about Ben Sherratt? He has 2 points for the Detroit Red Wings. Ryan McDonough, who we talked about, making that move to the Nashville Predators. He's got 3 points as well. I was looking down again, the rabbit hole. David Savard of the Montreal Canadiens doesn't have any points, but he's got 3 shots, he's got 3 hits, and 25 block shots. So I know it's not the point production you want, but if
that is a rabbit hole, my friend.
If you're in a categorical league, those block shots really do add up.
I'm a little bit surprised with some of your fill-in targets today, Steele. Some of them are a little bit off the mark. Some of them are a little bit bold, but I appreciate these categorical analyses. Very quickly before we get to break and hit up our friends at BetOnline, tease for the overlay. Aaron Ekblad's situation is getting almost downright sad because of how good
Yes.
he is when he's healthy. That's the kind of thing I'm feeling with Aaron Ekblad, because he also just seems like a prototypical stand-up stud on the blue line.
He
Very
is.
quiet off the ice, gets it done on the ice, gets it done at both ends. Can tell is a leader. He had surgery last year. I think he had a fractured ankle or some kind of fracture. That's for sure. And anyway, just in his regular season career, when he's healthy, he's elite. And
Yes.
replacing Gabriel Landeskog and his production, as much as I loved what he did last year, finding a quality D-man to get even close to what Aaron Ekblad is doing now in this season, if you're in 10, 12, 14 player teams or 14 team leagues, is going to be real hard. So anyway, we're going to talk about replacing a couple other players, Connor Brown, Tyler Bertuzzi. We're also going to talk about our big time bets and where you got to make those bets. You know it's betonline.net, your number one source for betting, football, and the start of the new basketball season. Find all of the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every single game. As always, just like us, BetOnline remains your continued source for all of your sports wagering information and live betting, up to the minute scores for every single sport out there. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Steele and I use it almost every single night to get our lines. That's why we like BetOnline. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Don't forget, we are free and available on all podcast platforms. Please make sure you hit the subscribe button and the follow button. Flip and I appreciate all the love and support out there. And once again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode, where again, we're talking about this injury bug that seems to be going around to start the season with some major key players for different organizations. We just finished talking about Gabriel Landeskog and Aaron Ekblad. Let's move over to, I think, the next piece, the next biggest key. I don't know what you think, but I think Tyler Bertuzzi might be a bigger piece with the injury that he's dealing with, out 4 to 6 weeks for the Detroit Red Wings with, I believe, a broken hand, you said?
They're saying upper body, but it looked like he took a shot off the arm area. So it's maybe an arm bone or wrist or hand. It's not clear just yet, but it's upper body and he took a shot up there. So
out 4 to 6 weeks for Tyler Bertuzzi. Again, another guy who I have in one of my many fantasy leagues this season. So he's been put on the IR. Again, looking down the rabbit hole, I've already listed a few of those different options. Again, I'm not going to be keeping these guys for that 4 to 6 week time. I'm going to be rotating them out, depending on which teams are playing more games, if guys are more available than others. But again, Tyler Bertuzzi, another guy who's going to be out for long term, 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Who's getting that opportunity now? Dominic Kubalik on the top line with Lucas Raymond and Dylan Larkin. That may be a guy to, take a chance on, because he's getting that top line opportunity now.
Yep. And Jakub Vrana is dealing with some sort of personal issue. He's been entered into the league program. We don't really know for what. He might be out for the next few weeks as well. And that means Philip Zadina is going to be worth a good look on that second line steal with Andrew Kopp and David Perron. I don't hate that combination for a young speedster in Zadina, who can be his style of game when you've got two responsible veterans that play two ways with Kopp and Perron. That might be the exact kind of situation that Philip Zadina, a former, again, I've been throwing out pick guesses. Gabe Vilardi, I'm pretty sure, was 10th. Philip Zadina was definitely first round. I want to say he was maybe 7th or 8th. But for a guy who has that kind of talent, Steele, playing with Kopp and Perron might be what he's needed to unlock that little bit. He was a great junior player in the QMJHL. I hope you're looking up Zadina, and you should also maybe look up Vilardi while you have a sec to see where they were drafted, because if they were 10th and 7th, you're going to be impressed. But anyway, the point remains. Tyler Bertuzzi's injury is significant. Connor Brown's is significant too, and we're going to get to that in a second. But in terms of production, Tyler Bertuzzi has been putting up more points and has been more valuable fantasy-wise. So you're going to have to look around a little bit to fill in these gaps. Again, we talked about Landeskog and Ekblad filling those holes. Filling Tyler Bertuzzi's will be a little bit easier, and you might even be able to do it and get lucky with a guy like Zadina if the Detroit Red Wings start to click. But there are options out there. Take a look around and see what you fill in. Steele's smiling a bit. Do we have any answers here on the draft?
Yeah, yeah. Zadina was drafted 6th overall for the
Red Wings.
I
said 7th. That's not bad.
You were close. You were pretty close.
I gotta check Velarde now.
But yeah, while you're searching up Gabe Velarde, it's going to be tough for the Detroit Red Wings losing a guy of Tyler Bertuzzi's caliber. He brings a lot to the game. He's got really underrated hands, underrated shot as well. But the physical aspect that he brings to the Red Wings organization and, game in and game out is going to hurt them for the next 4 to 6 weeks. And I know you really want to talk about Connor Brown as well, another guy who we talked about in the offseason. He was going to get that opportunity moving from the Ottawa Senators to the Washington Capitals, playing on that top line with Alexander Ovechkin. And at the time, now Dylan Strome, who was centering on that top line as well, who moves over to the Washington Capitals on the right side. Let me take a quick look over here.
Connor Sheary, it looks like.
Connor Sheary, it could be.
Connor
PJ
Oshie maybe slots up.
And that's actually another guy, again, Connor Sheary, a very underrated, under the radar type of third line grinder who can still get a ton of points for a third liner. And if he's going to get that opportunity on the first line, another guy who's, owned less than 15%.
100%. And very quickly, before I forget, because things have been getting a little foggy because I'm headed out for vacay mode. Gabe Velarde, 11th overall pick. So I was one off on both. That ain't too bad. Number 2. I have 2 main takeaways to wrap up these injuries before we quickly mention Connor Brown and get to the bets. The 2 things you can look at this by, Steele. Number 1 is there's going to be some opportunity for some of these players to step in and fill these holes. There's at least 3 or 4 weeks at minimum for all of these situations at minimum. So somebody on one of these rosters and some of these players we've mentioned within the teams themselves, Connor Sheary's and otherwise, will they step up and produce? We don't know, but some of them will. So take a look, do your research, take a shot. One of these players for sure in these 4 holes that we mentioned, Zadina's and otherwise, are going to do something. Number 2, I mentioned it to you off air. If you're in one of these situations where you're pretty confident in your fantasy hockey squad, finishing in, let's say, the top 3 in your league right now, no doubt you're comfortable, and you're, let's say, stacked at the defensive position, and you go to your GM who has Aaron Ekblad, and you're confident that giving up what he needs, a D-man, to take back maybe a couple of forwards, a little bit less, but you know your team's that good, and you know a guy needs a D-man, that's another angle that you could be taking. Same thing with the Landeskog. Does someone need a centerman, a forward? Take a look. There's angles to be had here, people.
Yeah.
The Connor Brown one, Steele, I think is left for last because he has had 0 points so far. He's done nothing with the opportunity that he's had. And now all of a sudden, look, if Connor Sheary can prove that he can get it done as a veteran playing on that top line with Ovi, no one in Washington is going to care where Connor Brown comes back and slots into this lineup. Yeah. That is for sure. So I think there's maybe not as much to look at here with Connor Brown, except for the player that we just mentioned, because also TJ Oshie might get slotted right up there as well. Got to keep your eye out, Steele, but keep out for the big time bets coming up right around the break.
Big time bets. We'll see if we can get bounced back in a big way to end this week off. But yes, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. For your second listen, though, go check out Game to Game NHL. Every moment, every performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers all games from across the league with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NHL, available on all podcast platforms, which also includes YouTube. Just like this podcast, make sure you go subscribe and hit the follow button. Flip and I appreciate all the love and support out there. Flip, the big time bets. I'm going to go back to last year. You and I were rock solid. We finished strong. We were above 500 record. We were really hitting every single week with the puck lines, the money lines, and especially you with the player props last year. We were on fire. Yep. That is not the case to start this season. It hasn't.
That is not the case.
No, it has not been great for us, Flip. But nonetheless, even though we're making confident picks and we feel confident going into the games, that just happens. Even though they're the underdog, they can still win the game. We've seen that time and time again, like we saw last week or a couple of days ago with the Coyotes against the Maple Leafs. That's how I want to start it off right now with my lock of the night. I'm taking the Maple Leafs on the money line, minus 165 against the Dallas Stars.
Thank you.
You and I talked about, we weren't really sure where to put the Dallas Stars at the end of the season. But to start the season, they seem to be really, really, really on fire right now. Yeah. But I got to go with the Maple Leafs. I think this might actually be my first Maple Leafs bet for this season. I'm taking them on the money line, minus 165. I really do believe if they don't win this game at home, there's going to be some quick changes coming to the lineup and maybe even behind the bench. Like this is just a bad start for them.
We haven't actually gotten too deep into how you and I have felt about the Toronto Maple Leafs, considering how close we both are to the team. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think we've done a really good job of trying to decompartmentalize this takes that we want to put down with this Maple Leafs team, because I'll say this, Steele. What you're saying about changes coming are so long overdue. I feel I can't see another offseason of them sitting by Kyle Dubas, of Brendan Shanahan not having to answer for any of the on-ice imperfections of this team. And it's so far from imperfections. It's glaring issues. And that loss to the Arizona Coyotes, I understand there was a questionable call to take away that goal.
Yeah.
You should not be within 1-goal games against this Arizona Coyotes team when you have Austin Matthews alone on your team. They are wasting this guy's prime. And now I'm getting real upset, Steele. And this is not what this episode is about. And you know what's crazy is I've got the Maple Leafs written down right here on this paper as well, because Sheldon Keefe called the team out and now he retracts his statement, which I think is also a little bit BS. If you rip your players for not playing good, let it simmer. I don't know what's going on in Toronto right now. I sound like an overreacting Toronto fan, but I'm not overreacting. I'm reacting to the last 7 years of bad decision-making for the most part in the front office and really soft play from most of these core players. And that's all it is. But hey, let's ride with them on the money line to respond, because Steele, I'm with you. I think if they reel off another couple of losses against some bad teams, if there's not a trade and a firing, I'm not talking about just one or the other. I need both. Yeah. This team is in trouble because they're not getting past. Don't get even me started on the Rangers and the Hurricanes. They're not getting past the Ottawa Senators this year. And I said it. So that's where I'm at with that. But hey, let's go with the Leafs on the money line, baby. Minus 165. Hey, let me drink the poison.
Well, is that also your lock of the night? Because
not my lock of the night. Right. My goodness, no.
That is my lock of the night. I'm going strong with the Maple Leafs for my first Maple Leaf bet this season. Look, we can get into a different conversation maybe for tomorrow's episode about what the heck's going on with this Leafs organization, this Leafs roster. But again, we'll save that for a different time. My second pick of the night.
Hit me.
I'm going to two teams that are probably the two worst teams in the league right now. Teams that haven't won a game yet. The Canucks versus the Minnesota Wild. I'm taking the Minnesota Wild on the money line, minus 170. And look, both these teams have been absolutely awful to start the season, but I'm taking the Wild on the money line for two reasons. One, I don't expect Marc-Andre Fleury to continue this very, very bad start to start the season again, especially against a very bad Vancouver Canucks team. Second reason, the Vancouver Canucks cannot hold on to a lead. All 4 games, they were winning by multiple goals, and they lost all 4 games, one of them being in overtime.
Yeah.
Even if the Canucks are up in this game, they will find a way to blow it somehow. And the Minnesota Wild are a good enough team. It's been a bad start for them, of course, but they are a good enough team to get past the Vancouver Canucks for their first win of the season. That is my second pick at minus 170 on the money line.
I'll throw this stat out there because I had to screenshot this when I saw this on Sportsnet earlier. Canucks are the first team in NHL history to lose each of their first 3 games of a season while blowing multi-goal leads in each contest.
And I told this to you the other day. The Minnesota Wild are the first team since 1989. 20 goals against in the first league. So those are some pretty bad stats right there.
So if you're not betting the over as well, you might want to wake up and do that, because it sounds like there's going to be a goals aplenty. But I'm with your second pick, Steele. Let me fire off my second, and we can wrap it up with our last picks. I'm going to leave my lock till the very end because I like keeping it spicy. What I've seen so far from this Calgary Flames team has me reconsidering what I said about the Edmonton Oilers and their push for the cup this year. Because my goodness, this Calgary Flames team is looking very, very, very solid.
Yes.
Top to bottom. Mackenzie Weegar is looking amazing. Huberdeau is starting to settle in. Everyone was like, oh, he's a little quiet in the first two games. He's not going to be quiet much longer. He's settled in now, and watch him go. The Calgary Flames on the puck line, Steele, are where I want to go for my second pick of the night at minus 105. That's a pretty good odd because I understand the Buffalo Sabres are fresh off an upset win on the road in Edmonton. This is the Buffalo Sabres with Craig Anderson and Eric Comrie, and they're out west on a very tough Western road swing. They will not show up the way they showed up against Edmonton, not against how good this Calgary team has looked, and I'm fine with riding with Calgary. If it means I take another L, I'll take another L with, to me, has looked like the best team in the league so far, other than your New York Rangers.
Yeah, they've been absolutely fire. Look, I was at that Edmonton Oilers Flames game on Saturday the 15th. I looked down for maybe a second, and it was 4-1 Flames before even the 5-minute mark, or before the 15-minute mark in the first period. There was 5 goals scored. It was absolutely crazy to see. They were absolutely on fire, but that's where I'm going to as well. I've also got the Flames, but I don't know whether I want to take the puck line or the money line, because I was looking at the 3 games they've played. The first game, they were up 5-1 against the Avs. They won 5-3, so they won by multiple goals. They were up 4-1 against the Oilers, and they won 4-3, so another close game. And then they were losing 2-0 to the Knights, and they won 3-2. So very close games, even though they have been dominant and have looked very good, very good. Buffalo has looked very decent as well. And I know you're talking about a Western Conference road swing right now. I think I'm going to stay on the money line. I'm definitely going to stay on the money line with the Flames. So that money line, again, it's minus 275, but
you're parlaying again, correct?
I am parlaying it. So Maple Leafs minus 165, Wild minus 170, and the money line minus 275. I'm parlaying all 3 of those. I'm taking the favorites in these games because, again, I'm very confident with my picks. It hasn't been a great start, but I really like where those 3 teams are for these games as well.
I appreciate you mentioning earlier that last year I finished on a pretty serious heater with those player props. I actually finished the year last year with my lock record at 43-30. I finished 30 wins above 500, and this year has been a struggle for both of us. You're sitting at 7-14-0. I'm at 8-13-0, and we're not even going to mention the lock records. If you want to check those out, hit us up on Twitter and put your glasses on because it ain't pretty. But I'm going to wrap it up, Steele, with a team that I might as well have this jersey hanging back here in my rafters. The Ottawa Senators had that Canadian Tire Center or Canadian Tire Arena, whatever it is, in Canada, rocking the other night for their home opener. Good Boston Bruins team on the road in Ottawa. An interesting game, like you said, 3-0, then 3-3, then 4-3, 5-4, back and forth. They end up winning that bad boy 7-5. I think that's a big character-building win for a Sens team that started the year off with 2 losses. Come home again here, the Ottawa Senators Steele on the money line, minus 115. I'm feeling it here. The Washington Capitals are one of those teams this year that I think they're either going to look great or be horribly awful. I don't think there's going to be much middle ground for this Washington team. And I like the Ottawa Senators to maybe go on a little run here. So give me them on the money line, my lock of the night at minus 115, which is a very generous odd against the Washington Capitals.
Yeah, and I also think Kuznetsov is out for this game as well because of that one-game suspension. Connor Brown, we already talked about the injury as well. The Washington Capitals just haven't looked great to start the season, so I am a fan of that pick as well. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Again, we are free and available on all podcast platforms, which also includes YouTube. So make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. Flip and I appreciate all the love and support out there. If you've placed any bets, if you put any money down, good luck with that. Good luck with those bets. Hopefully you can get some money in return, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.